Hello, good morning, everyone. So, as part of our Voter Quench Talk series, today we are joined by Saratu of the Testimonial Archive Project and Chioma Dike of Africa Daughters Foundation. So, we'll be covering the value of the girl child in Nigeria, human trafficking, and what the government needs to do to stop this era of terrorism in Nigeria that has been all over the news internationally. But I'll start out also with introducing both ladies with brief bios. um, so Saratu holds a degree in international studies from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She's also worked on gender and youth-related programs at the USAID-funded International Republican Institute and Iketi Development Foundation, and as an editor for the Washington D.C.-based news aggregator AllAfrica.com. She's currently based in Abuja, Nigeria, where she works as the communications officer at the Partnership Initiatives in the Niger Delta, a Chevron-funded foundation with a focus on economic development and field offices in Warri Delta State and Port Harcourt River State. As an avid blogger, Saratu is also the politics editor of Nigerians Talk, an online community of bloggers writing on culture and politics, and has recently started Testimonial Archive Project, a website documenting the experiences of survivors of militant violence in the northeast of Nigeria. Chioma Dike is a servant of justice and human rights through policy, and is a political science honors alumni of Howard University, and has worked extensively for the rights of women throughout Africa and for justice in Nigeria. She's also worked with Amnesty International for Stop the Violence Against Women campaign. She's the director of the nonprofit social justice group Miacheki Union, and she's also helped to end arbitrary practices within the Nigerian legal system with cases such as Patrick Okorofor. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, I'm sorry. And then also she's established the Africa's Daughters Foundation as an executive director, which serves to promote STEM education, which is science, technology, engineering, and math education. So today, again, we're going to be talking about the Bring Back Our Girls campaign, and I'd love to just start out with a few questions. But initially, I guess, both ladies, you can start off with telling me your take on what's happening, starting with Saratu.
My take on what exactly? Bring Back Our Girls generally?
Hello?
Or... I'm here. Do you mean Bring Back Our Girls generally, or do you mean...
Saratu? Okay, well, we'll get...
Hello?
We'll get the other speaker to talk, Chioma. Can you begin with just telling me, your take on things?
Yes. Well, Bring Back Our Girls. It's a social movement. It's not only to bring back the 200 plus girls who were kidnapped in Chibok in Borno State, but it's also a movement that Nigeria's young generation has stepped out to basically make the government accountable. I believe Bring Back Our Girls is a watershed moment. It's something that really changed the course of the direction of Nigeria's government and how it relates to its people, its constituents, and what they expect from their government. I think now is being vocalized. So Bring Back Our Girls is much bigger than one community. It's much bigger than one gender and one demographic. It's actually something that ties together the entire Nigerian community, but also the international community.
Okay. And what do you think would be the appropriate next steps for this situation?
Appropriate next steps. Well, I think that all the current leaders now need to really open their eyes, shine their eyes. They need to really look at what's going on now. They really need to take heed to all the comments that are being made by community leaders and the people in general. The next steps, I think, need to be taken tackling corruption. That's number one. We see that through active and passive corruption participation in the government, it's basically leaking out all of our funds, the funds that would have been used to fund our military, to equip them, to have them trained and ready for moments like in instances like this. They're just not ready. And so corruption plays a major part in that. And so tackling corruption, being really serious and head on with it, is, I believe, the next step towards taking Nigeria to the place that it needs to be, the place that it deserves to be, given its population, given its wealth, everything, given its clout. It just deserves to be at a different place than where it is right now. And I think that by us tackling corruption, that is the next step. Not only basically ending Boko Haram, that's the obvious next step, but
of course,
we definitely need to look at corruption.
Right. And Saratu, why do you think there's such an indictment and an attack on education, especially for young girls?
Can you hear me, first of all? Hello? Hello?
I can hear you.
You can. Okay, very good. Okay. If I may just backtrack here for a second, this is not. I want us to just. It's not about the girls alone. It's about students, and they're targeting children. I wouldn't specifically say that they're targeting young girls, and I'll say this. And why am I saying this? Last year there were 2 massacres. One was in a government secondary school in Buniade in Yobe State that saw scores of young children, secondary school age children, many of them boys, killed. In fact, the one in that secondary school, they actually ordered the girls to go and get married while they slaughtered all their male, classmates. Then there was a killing in the agricultural college in Gujba, also in Yobe State, a mass killing where they went into the dorms and just brutally mass murdered a whole bunch of children, many of them boys actually. In that, so it's not necessarily Boko Haram does not discriminate in its psychopathy. They have a problem with students and people who are active participants in the educational systems, teachers, students, schools, burning down school. They burned down a school in Bauchi State. It was just a building. There were no students in there, but they burnt it down symbolically. I think there have been similar attacks
and why
in
do you
Taraba
think,
as well.
I'm sorry to cut you off. Why do you think, why do they perceive the pursuit of education as such a threat?
They see, according to what, hearing what they say, they believe that the education is a corrupting influence in society, and it's anti-Islamic. That's what they think. So for them, it's it goes in some way against what they believe is the best form of government, which is an Islamic caliphate, which of course would be controlled by them. So obviously, it's all a quest of power and a display of power that masquerades itself as the religiosity.
Do you want me to chime in?
Yes, please. Sure.
Well, yes, they do believe that education is basically an heir to society, but more so specifically Western education. Just like the other instances that she mentioned, when they took these girls, they told them, some of them that escaped, they reported back saying that, they wanted them to go home and take care of their families. These are young girls. And they wanted them to go home and take care of their families, even as young as 9. They encourage girls to go and get married. And we look at that as a way of control. Not only that, but they understand the key role that women play in society. And so they know that by crippling the female population and by keeping them from gaining an education, they're basically, trying to hinder the future of the society. We know that women, their education, their health, their status, they intimately affect the health, the education, the status of the children. So if they are able to get the women, then they affect, the future society. And not only that, but if a woman is educated, she's able to teach her son, the way to go and not to follow, certain doctrines that they follow. So they're basically trying to keep, control over the minds of people, so that they can continue their practices and what they're doing.
Do you think that speaks to the role of men in Nigerian society and how that should be altered, and maybe, situations like this would happen less often?
So the role of men,
yeah, like, mentoring other men, or, teaching them specific values so that they don't perceive something as education as such a threat.
Definitely, that's definitely something that needs to take place. This is this brings open the topic of women's issues, but men definitely need to take an active role in promoting these same things. They need to take an active role in promoting women's rights, because it not only just affects the women, but it affects families, communities. And if men are involved, this is actually sustainable. It's not just something that you want to just give assistance to women. You want women to also be the designers of the programs that will promote women's rights, and the implementers that will promote these rights as well. But we need men to, to stand with us and to actually promote these things, because it garners a healthier society and healthier future.
Okay.
So, yeah, definitely.
And Saratu, can you also speak to that as well?
Sure. It's worth noting that in the north, this particular area of the country has seen, has a really low literacy rate, really low, school going rate. So and especially among girls, you understand. So there definitely does need to be a lot of awareness and in these communities about the importance of going to school. But the Chibok local government that this attack happened specifically according to Senator Ali Ndume of Borno State, the senator who manages that area. He said that Chibok local government is has the highest school going rate in the state. This community, what makes it especially tragic is that this community are a community that's dedicated to education and really believe in education. And I live in Abuja, and we stay the Abuja sit-ins. A lot of the Chibok community members have been coming actually to the sit-ins that have been held in Abuja, and they've been talking about how really all they wanted was for their children to have a better life, a better future than them, and understanding that the importance of education. What we need is for our government to create an enabling environment so that these families could actually safely hope for a better life, and and make it easier and safer for their children to go to school. Because it's one thing to say that, oh, let's make sure that people go to school, another thing to actually protect them and allow them the peace to allow their dreams to flourish in through education.
And I would also add that the poor are more likely to not send their children to school, but in cases where they're able to send a child to school, they often opt to send their boy child to school versus the girl. So we really have to look at that. It's not only we also have to look at the gender parity in education and what these girls are really going through in these communities. The struggle to send their children to school is very real, and the girl children are not a priority, so that also plays a role.
Yeah, definitely. There's
and I guess let's backtrack a little bit. Can you both define what Boko Haram is? Saratu, you can start off by just explicitly defining what it is. I mean, I think we all know, but just to put it in literal terms.
Boko Haram is an armed group that professes Islam and claims to want an Islamic caliphate to replace whatever governing structures are currently in place. It doesn't believe in the Nigerian state. It believes that people should be answerable to God through them, of course. I mean, and they don't they believe that all governance instruments in Nigeria are evil because they are not godly, and what they believe is that a state should be answerable to God. So, which basically nullifies the entire existence of a state. You understand? They want to put in, a caliphate that answers to specific laws, probably like a really harsh form of Sharia. So, a very, very Wahhabist. So think Al Shabaab. Think Taliban. That's pretty much what they're hoping to install up north. The origins of Boko Haram started from when Nigeria first became a democracy in the late 1990s, and folks were clamoring for Sharia law in certain states up north. That was installed, but
they've been around for a while.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. The origins of it started there. People like Muhammad Yusuf, they started their own, radical mosques, with their teaching starting then. People like Shekau were at the, were at the Institute of Islamic Studies in Maiduguri at the time, and they became radical clerics. Banded together, built mosques, started a bit of a movement. Started actually pretty benignly, the way these Islamic groups tend to start. They tend to start as almost charity organizations. Oh, you don't have any water in your community? Here, I'll build you a well. You don't have any food? Here's some food. Here's some water. And start to build a following that way. And because of the poverty in that's so endemic that in these states, they got a large following. A huge Al-Madri population up north. They got a large following, and people started to follow them and started to believe in them. And that was how they started to get a foothold. And this is what happens in places where you see state failure really to provide even the most basic of amenities to their people, water, electricity, food, light. You see these radical elements stepping in and creating almost an alternative to government, and then using these people as they wish.
Yeah, then she said it out.
Okay, all right. Well then, Sharma, can you tell me, I guess from your account, what their impact on Nigerians, because people have learned about Boko Haram internationally, essentially from this whole Bring Back Our Girls campaign. But I'm sure we all know that they've been around for a while. So can you tell me like your accounts or things that they've been doing that people were not well versed on?
Well, they've been bombing schools, churches, mosques, agricultural centers. Between 2002 to 2010, I think the death toll was about 10,000, and even just this year alone, the death toll has risen up to 3,000 since the beginning of the year. So, they've been terrorizing communities in the north for a while now, and it took this kidnapping to really, get the attention of everyone. I don't know what that means. The fact that so many lives have been lost, and up until this point, the kidnapping is really what brought a global spotlight to this issue. But what this means for those even in the diaspora is, there's a basic sense of unrest. We, even though we're not in Nigeria, we are living this. We're not living it directly because we're not in, harm's way. But the state of Nigeria right now is being jeopardized by criminalization and terrorism. So we're also concerned. We're not only just concerned, but we're very active in seeing that Nigeria's course goes into the direction that it should be going, and that Boko Haram is stopped.
And what about the void that the government leaves for things like Boko Haram to kind of persist and exist. Saratu, you can take that one.
Are you asking what should be done about that void? Hello? Lande?
I think that's.
Are you asking what should be done about that void?
Hello?
Yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Okay,
Hello?
London is asking, can you repeat the question?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry about that. Basically, I wanted to know, why has the government left such a void for a group like Boko Haram to persist in what they're doing? And what do you think what do you think the government should be doing?
Well, the government created the void largely because of corruption. When you have, I'm sure every state has had a decent allocation of financial and other resources for years now, but the money not being used as it should be. And a really corrupt political elite in this country that has maintained a code of silence. So you don't really see that many whistleblowers coming out and saying, "Hey, this person stole X amount of money that was meant to be for this, but was ended up being used for that." So I think corruption plays a large part into the kind of into the insecurity that we have today. And I think we're finally beginning to see the ways in which corruption can kill.
Yeah, definitely. I feel that the corruption is, just like I pointed out earlier,
Yeah.
is one of the main issues here. The fact that our military was not trained up until this incident, which even the president himself said that the military was not ready for this, that nothing like this has happened before in Nigeria. In his media chat, he did say this. So if a whole president can say that the military was not ready for this, it speaks to Nigeria's military capabilities, its training, it's what has it been doing with the money that's been given for counterterrorism in Nigeria. And we really need to make them accountable. I think that's what this movement is really, that's the main focus at this point, is making them accountable, letting them understand that these are the consequences to corruption. Children are being kidnapped from their schools. Children are being killed in their schools. Communities are being burnt. Cars are being blown up. People can't go outside. Mothers are crying nonstop and it all boils down to corruption, because Nigeria has the capability of being one of the top countries in the world, but because its politicians have pocketed that money, have sent that money overseas to Swiss bank accounts, and have done all sorts of things with their personal investments, it basically it erodes the fabric of what Nigeria could be. The fact that Nigeria, their politicians are so consumed with themselves and they're consumed with their own activities, and it's almost running the government as if it's a business and not something that is to govern the people. They're elected by the people, for the people, and I think that's the way that Nigeria's politicians need to begin to think and to understand the implications of what it means to not allocate the funds appropriately.
Right. Can you also, Chioma, talk about what can be done to prevent all the kids that are attending all the Alamajiris from going extremist?
That's a nice question. What can be done to prevent? What can be done? Education. Education, one. I believe it's the senator, I forget his name, but he did mention that poverty, illiteracy, and the lack of employment were the reasons why all of these things were happening. So the government focusing its energies on not only ending corruption and and tackling the issues with Boko Haram, but going forward, making sure that the children in Nigeria receive adequate education. 10.5 out of Nigeria's children are not in school right now, out of 57 worldwide. So you look at that percentage out of just Nigeria alone, 57 million in the world, and 10.5 are in Nigeria alone. That's a really high number, and we really need to look at that. And out of that 10.5, 6 million are girls. So when these girls and these children are not in school, that leaves them, vulnerable to so many different alternative lifestyles. And we really need to tackle that going forward to secure our future. Talk about poverty and the lack of employment. All of these issues are things that Nigeria's government really needs to be focusing on. That's what the government is for. That's what they were elected for. So these are some of the preventative things that I think need to be addressed.
Right. So apparently France had a summit with African and Western leaders. Can you talk about the outcome of that, Chioma?
Okay. Yes, I can.
Okay.
I want to read off something that I got from that.
Okay.
In his May 17th speech at a conference on terrorism in Paris, Jonathan laid out an articulate case for taking on Boko Haram, calling it a new frontier in the global war of terrorism against our civilization. And he said that this should not go unanswered. He also suggested that the administration's progress is promoting economic growth and opportunity, and that this is what provoked the attacks and the terrorism. He said, quote, "Our success is their failure." So he's basically saying whatever it is that Nigeria's government has done to progress Nigeria's people at this point is the reason why terrorism. I really want to look at that, and I want to look at that on the other side. I think the lack of the progress can be cited as one of the reasons why this is happening. If Boko Haram was tackled in a way that was more effective from the original way when they killed Mohammed Youssef back in 2009, if it was done in a more sophisticated way, if Nigeria's military was more equipped to protect the people, especially in the north, even during the state of emergency, these issues wouldn't be happening. I don't know if the economic growth and opportunity that the president has spoken about is really the reason why Boko Haram has persisted. I think the lack thereof, really.
Right. Okay. So Saratu, both you both have been talking about education and how valuable that is to prevent that from happening. So I guess I wanted to find out, you talked about the stats of education, but what is the overall status of education in Nigeria, and how does that impact these young girls or other young children that are vulnerable to Boko Haram? I'm also getting on the back end. Sorry, hold on a second. That Saratu's mic is muted, so I just wanted to let her know that might be why she wasn't audible earlier. So Saratu, if you can hear me, please unmute your mic.
Can you hear me? Please unmute your mic. I don't think.
Okay. All right. Well, we
Okay, I think that's better now. Yeah.
I'll talk to you in the meantime.
I can hear her.
Okay. Good.
Okay. Saratu, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
She can hear me.
Yes.
All right. Cool. Yeah. So basically, I was talking about the state of education in Nigeria. What is the overall state of education in Nigeria, Saratu? And because obviously this is related, to again organizations like Boko Haram.
Um, well, education in Nigeria, the state of education in Nigeria is abysmal. I think that's pretty safe to say, and that's across the board. Whether we're talking north, south, west, east. Um, uh, particularly tertiary education facilities not always being, up to par. Teachers not always being qualified, very often not being qualified. And then, of course, there's the politics of the teachers' unions. I know there's been a couple of states in the Southwest that have tried to do what do you call them? Tests to test the competence of their of teachers, and teacher unions have pushed back against these tests. So there's a bit of a political economy around education as well, and that's pretty much all I've got. And as far as, so on its own, education in Nigeria needs needs to be intervened on. Needs major policies, to improve better. That's quite aside from the issue of security. And particularly in vulnerable places, you need to make sure that people are, that our schools are safe. And that's just throughout the country, but especially in more vulnerable places as well.
Okay, so it looks like Aisha Osori has joined us, but she kept a weekly column for years and was the first pedestrian lawyer in This Day's Lawyer, and most recently Nigerian Citizen leadership newspaper, where she covered social issues ranging from security and good governance to politics and values. So just wanted to introduce her. I know you came in late, but better late than never. And I guess I'll direct my next question to you. We've been talking about Boko Haram and the Bring Back Our Girls campaign. There's been a strong emphasis on education in this discussion so far. But I also wanted to talk about the momentum of Bring Back Our Girls, because this seems to be like the catalyst for raising awareness about this, issue in Nigeria. Once it loses steam, because in most cases situations like this do, what can we do to increase efforts to not allow that to happen?
Okay. Hi everyone, and sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry I'm late. Crossed lines, sort of. That's a very good question. You're right. Usually these types of campaigns will lose steam after a while. This is actually the longest campaign that I'm aware of.
Yeah, me too.
Considering, can you hear me properly?
Yeah.
Okay. Considering that there are lots of issues to campaign around in Nigeria, I think part of the reason why it's gone on this long is because NLC hasn't joined, even though I know there's a push to try and get NLC to join. But for now, it's still been people who have an interest. What can we do if the campaigns end, if the daily sittings in Abuja end, and if other states, in Lagos had a prayer session, I think, yesterday. So when we find that there's less rallying and prayers and calls for action and days of red, I think that's where the CSOs, that's where civil society picks up from. And I'm aware that there's a coalition of different civil society organizations working closely with the campaigners to put in place structures around particularly trauma counseling for the parents, getting ready to work with the girls when they come back, not if they come back. I think the UN is also fully involved. We had a meeting with the UN Women, the head of the UN Women 2 weeks ago, 2 Sundays ago, and she was very clear that the UN and the UNDP, I think UNESCO as well, are all involved and working with the government to see what they can do. So I think even when the campaigns and rallying stop, there will still be civil society and international donor agencies who will still be working actively behind the scenes to see what could happen. I think the issue has also gone a little bit beyond just Bring Back Our Girls. Now there's a lot of focus on the army and their competence and what's going on with them. There's also a lot of discussion now about things like what happens when you call in for an emergency. So because there was the Amnesty International report that said the military had noticed. So now there's going to be lots of protocols and a few more guidelines around what happens when there's an emergency. So I think those are all the things that will continue happening even when the campaign stops. If citizens want to know what they can do, then I would think maybe still talking about it every platform they get, still blogging about it, or writing about it, or tweeting about it. I mean, those are the things that I think are within the power of citizens to keep doing.
Thank you. Speaking of, citizens taking matters into their own hands, there's been some recent news reports of, people in different regions of Nigeria basically counterattacking Boko Haram efforts. Do you think that this is something that's going to continue? Suratu, I'd love for you to talk about that. And why?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I think the counter protests almost are going to continue because the way, so Bring Back Our Girls is aimed at government, at the government, and trying to hold them to some accountability. Unfortunately, what's happening is that it's being seen as a political thing, right? So you have counter. When the government finally got its messaging in straight, and because if you remember, there was like 2 weeks of silence on the part of the government. When they finally did get their messaging right, it became, well, don't blame us, we're not Boko Haram. If you really, the person to blame is Boko Haram, not us. We're not the ones that abducted the girls. So why are you protesting to us? You understand? So you have the whole release our girls, stop Boxeno to Boko Haram, stop Boko Haram, kind of on the government side, basically saying, let us not blame the government for it. So it's very much a pro government angle to it. But I mean, I personally think, and I think a lot of people, the criticism of this counter movement is that, it does no one any good, for our government to abdicate its responsibilities to its people. I mean, the Boko Haram is not constitutionally mandated to protect Nigerian citizens, but the government is. Our government is mandated to protect us. So yes, when it's kind of like saying that if an armed robber comes and robs your house, you go to the armed robber to complain. You don't go to the police and say, could you please help me get justice for this crime.
Good points. Good points. And also to, again, piggyback off of that response, should we be concerned about the militarization of Africa? Because recently the USA sent 80 troops to Chad, and there's just been a lot of involvement and input from the West about what's happening. So Chioma, what do you think?
I think given the past situations in Africa with international military presence, there's a right to be concerned. But we can't assume that because the there's an international military presence there in Nigeria, that Nigeria will be stripped of its autonomy. We have to trust that there will be an assurance, some kind of assurance, that even with the help of international military and armed forces, that there's nothing going on behind closed doors that will result in like a complete takeover. But one thing that Nigerian government has mastered is political leverage. I mean, they know when it comes to that, they know what to do. So I think it also speaks to our faith in Nigeria's government. Given everything that's happened, we're kind of just a little bit wary about, okay, well, if you invite the U.S., France, and even Israel is sending people over. You know, if we invite all of these people, what does that mean for Nigeria's government? I think it speaks to the faith of Nigeria's population for their government.
Right, right. And then we're going to wrap up here, but you know, I just want Aisha to answer the last question, which is what legislative strategies can be used for, you know, what's happening with the Bring Back Our Girls campaign? You know, anyone that works in Nigerian government or is in heavy communication with them or just has an ability to, you know, sway or influence policy, what do you think they can or should be doing?
Well, I mean, well, honestly, that's a very good question, which usually we say that when we don't have an answer. But the only thing I've thought about so far in terms of legislation is the Violent Against Persons bill, which has been passed by the Senate, but has not been passed by the House of Reps. It was passed by the Senate last year in its current form or version, and it's been languishing in the House of Representatives ever since. And we've actually had some form of violence against women or violence against persons bill in the National Assembly since the 5th Assembly, which would be about 12 years ago. It'll be 12 years next year that we've been trying to pass some sort of violence against women or violence against persons act. So for me, what's going on with the Bring Back Our Girls, so with the situation that's led to Bring Back Our Girls, which is basically the abduction of these girls and the stories we've heard, the 2 girls who were found in the woods who said they had been raped, the stories of the girls who managed to escape and said that, you know, the rape was happening, and even the stories of the women who'd been taking since last year, who've been trickling back, who all say that they've been raped and used as domestic slaves. Now, this would be the perfect opportunity to sort of get the outrage that all Nigerians feel and get that kind of bill passed. It would, at the end of the day, it would go beyond just dealing with this issue of Boko Haram and the girls, but it will also cover and provide more women around Nigeria with more protection against domestic violence and state-sponsored violence and things like that. So for me, this is the most opportune thing I can think of right now. Other than that, if there was some sort of way to legislate around how the army spends its money, but I doubt if that can happen. We can only do what we do right now, which is basically oversight of the budget. But it's obviously clear that some sort of change in how things are done with the army has to happen, whether it's how the protocols of information and communication and who responds when there's a crisis, and to just the welfare of the soldiers. We spent a lot of time in Nigeria talking about the welfare of police, but nobody's talking about the welfare of the soldiers. Not the top brass in Abuja, but the men on the ground, you know, who keep complaining of small rations, insufficient food, not being paid on time. All those things need to be dealt with. I mean, that's part of the reason why we can't deal with Boko Haram, because our army has been stripped of its discipline and training and even welfare. So for me, those are the 2 key policy areas that I would think we should focus on.
Well, thank you. You know, thank you, Aisha. Thank you, Chioma. Thank you, Saratu, for joining this, you know, very important discussion. And, you know, anyone that's listening and watching, we appreciate your support as well. And just stay tuned for the next Voter Quench chat. Thanks again.